Matt Dallek, a political historian, also professor of political management at George Washington University. Matt, thank you so much for your time. What will his legacy be?
Well, I think he's going to have a legacy in at least three parts. The first will be when he was chief of staff to Gerald Ford and Secretary of Defense to George H.W. Bush during the first Iraq War, that he was a Republican stalwart, a conservative operator, if you will, at a time when, in the 1970s and 80s and 90s. The second part, of course, maybe the most central chapter, is likely to be his vice presidency, when I think he will be remembered as really synonymous with the war on terror, an architect of many of the most critical decisions, whether it was establishing Guantanamo prison, invading Iraq, the conduct of the war in Afghanistan, the surge in Iraq. And then the third kind of final act will be what people have been talking about today since his death, which is this really shocking endorsement, in a way, of Kamala Harris over Donald Trump in 2024.
I thought you were going to talk about him shooting his friend in the face while they were quail hunting.
Yes.
Look, Matt.
Well, that will also be mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Was he always the belligerent hawk that we saw during his time as vice president with George W. Bush, or did that occur because of 9/11 and because of the war on terror? Did he have that in him throughout his political career?
I think it's a great question. I think it's one probably historians will debate. I think the short answer is probably yes, that post 9/11, he was reflecting in an accelerated way his interventionist impulses, right? His internationalist views. After all, he was a former Secretary of Defense. He had long been, I think, pretty hawkish, and was not terribly allergic to using military power. Remember, he was Secretary of Defense during the first Gulf War, a very successful military operation. But 9/11 did have, of course, an impact on everyone who was in power. But Cheney, I think, Vice President Cheney in particular, became, I think, more hawkish, more aggressive, especially in the 2 or 3 years after the attacks. So it was consistent with, I think, his biography, his political history, but I think it became intensified after the terror attacks in 9/11.
There was I don't want to say awful, let's say uncomfortable coming together of politics and business, which also had that geopolitical angle. Because after all the damage that the American invasion of Iraq produced in that country, much of the rebuilding contracts were given to Halliburton. And Dick Cheney, being vice president during the Second Gulf War, then being on the board of Halliburton, a company which made billions out of the reconstruction, was that something that, was it pre-planned almost? Because it was very uncomfortable to observe from the outside.
Yeah, I don't think it was pre-planned. I don't think that there was some kind of grand, conspiracy where Cheney said, let's invade Iraq so that I can later get rich. I mean, he was already very wealthy when he entered the White House as vice president. But I think what it reflects, though, is a kind of uncomfortable, some would say corrupt, often reality in American politics, which is this commingling of business and policy. There's supposed to be ethics rules, right, to separate, to wall off these kinds of concerns. Those rules don't often work very effectively. And of course, people in power often flow into the private sector after they've achieved power. And so Cheney, in that way, his time with Halliburton, either before or after his time in the White House, was really more of a norm than an exception, I would say.
Matt, you answered that question much better than I phrased it, which I presume is the reason you're a professor and I'm sitting in a TV studio. Thank you so much indeed for your time.
It's my pleasure. Great talking to you.